It was the look on the nurse's face as I walked in, eyes lowered, lips pressed together like she was holding back words that would break me. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I'd walk in, and she'd be there, sleepy, hooked up to machines, maybe looking a little worse for wear but alive. My mind couldn't let go of that thread of hope even though my heart already knew. She wasn't supposed to be gone. We were supposed to have more time. Her name was Lila. We'd been together for almost 5 years, and I could never believe I was lucky enough to have her. She was everything, bright and bold, with this laugh that filled the room. She made me feel like I'd finally found someone who really saw me, who could walk through life with me and make the ordinary feel like magic. I'd come home, and there she'd be, barefoot in the kitchen, hair pulled back, dancing to some old song, and suddenly it felt like nothing else mattered. But that night, everything changed. We were at our favorite spot by the lake, celebrating our anniversary, just the two of us under a sky full of stars. Lila had planned the whole thing, picnic basket, cozy blanket, even those little sparkling lights she loved. I still remember how the stars reflected in her eyes, like she was holding a piece of the universe in her gaze. We talked about our future, all the things we wanted to do, travel, buy a house, maybe even have kids someday. Then, on the way home, out of nowhere, a car came speeding around the corner, skidding right into us. I remember the flash of headlights, the sound of metal crunching, the sickening jolt as everything went black. When I came to, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I turned to find her slumped over, her hand slipping out of mine, and I knew. The paramedics came. They pulled me from the car, patched up the cuts on my face, tried to tell me things I barely heard because all I wanted was to stay there, next to her. I kept thinking maybe she'd open her eyes, maybe this was just a nightmare. But they moved her gently, covered her with a blanket, and I knew there was no waking up from this. The funeral was a blur. Her family and friends filled the room, people who loved her, who'd seen her light up their lives in one way or another. I stood at the front, hands shaking, trying to hold it together as I talked about her, about the way she loved sunsets, how she'd laugh so hard she'd snort, how she'd sing in the shower like nobody was listening. I remember looking at all those faces, each one bearing its own grief, and yet feeling like mine was heavier than anything in the world. In the days after, I wandered through our apartment, each room echoing with memories of her. Her clothes were still hanging in the closet, her favorite book still lying open on the nightstand. Everywhere I looked, there were these traces of her life, little pieces of her left behind like she might just walk back in any minute and pick them up. But she wouldn't. There were nights I couldn't sleep. I'd sit on the couch, replaying our last day together, trying to hold on to every detail, the way her fingers felt laced with mine, the soft way she whispered "I love you" just before we got in the car. It's like, somehow, if I held on to those memories tight enough, she'd still be here. I'd even talk to her sometimes, like she could hear me, like I could just tell her all the things I was too afraid to say when she was still here. My friends tried to help. They'd come by, bring food, try to get me to go out, take me for walks, anything to pull me out of the dark hole I was sinking into. And I was grateful, truly, but it felt like there was this gap they couldn't cross, a place they couldn't reach. How could they understand? They hadn't lost her. One night, a few months later, I finally broke down. I was cleaning up, finally putting away some of her things. I came across her old jacket, the one she wore every time we went to the lake, the one that still smelled faintly like her. I held it close, and I cried, really cried, for the first time since she left. All the hurt, all the longing, everything came rushing out like a dam breaking. That's when it hit me that grief isn't about letting go, it's about finding a way to carry them with you, even if it feels impossible. It's been over a year now, and I still feel her presence in small, quiet ways. When I see a lake, when I hear one of her favorite songs, when I pass by her favorite restaurant. There's a part of her that's always with me, even though the ache doesn't ever really go away. People tell you it gets easier with time, but that's not quite right. You just learn to live with the weight, to carry it like an old scar. Some days it hurts, some days it's just there, a dull ache in the background. But in a strange way, that ache is comforting, a reminder that she was real, that what we had was real, and that I was lucky enough to love her. I still talk to her sometimes, under my breath, when no one's around. And on nights when the stars are out, I swear I feel her there beside me, smiling, like she's waiting at the lake for me, lights twinkling, picnic basket ready.